Hello and welcome back to another episode of Vikings Happy Hour, sponsored by Lake Monster Brewing, That's Badass Wood Art, and Eastside Jiu-Jitsu. Remember to use promo code CT Pocket for 20% off any one item at That's Badass Wood Art. And while you're here, hit the like and subscribe button. We're super close to 3,000 subscribers, and when we get there, we'll do a giveaway for a custom Skol piece. We got the whole crew here, all five of us. Miles with the late surprise here to join us and talk about the draft this weekend with the Vikings. So I'm just going to throw it right out to all of y'all, and you can take the lead on it. But what did you think after the draft concluded? Were you satisfied with who we selected? Yeah, we'll just start there. Nobody.
I'll go.
You gotta start telling people, Matt, who you want to go. We got too many people here.
I know. I guess it's just been three of us.
Yeah, no. I'd say generally speaking, I'm cool with the draft. Like, I think like a solid B plus ish is kind of where I would land with it. I don't know. I find draft season to be funny, generally speaking, because like we all anchor on like these rankings, these like ratings for players that come out before the draft, and then like after the draft, we use those ratings to grade players. But like often the NFL like disagrees, right? Mm-hmm. And those ratings are made like generally speaking for like all teams and not specific to like what your team is doing and the fit and how those players are going to fit into the scheme, and then get angry about like what happens in the draft. And like overall, like they did things that I think most of us here would want them to do. Like they went after important high value positions in today's NFL. They went and bolstered the passing game, and we know passing is what you need to be able to do to win in the NFL. They attacked a weak league system, like, you know, cornerback DBs doubled up there to bring in versatile players. I think Miles called that out, you know, the last time we were on together. Like that seems to be, when we're thinking about DBs, one of the big things that they really love is players that can play inside, outside, play in a lot of different positions, do a lot of different things. And that's something that seemed to carry on through this draft. You know, we can nitpick, and, you know, they traded up for a defensive tackle that has horrible athletic testing and not a lot of great production. They seem to see something there that we don't. It's later in the draft. Like, if that's what we have to be upset about, you know, like, and then they went and drafted Miles to play quarterback for us, which is also dope, you know. So you know, we gotta love that. So, you know, how can you not love that? How could you not love that? No, like, all in all, they did, I think, most of the things we'd like them to do, and then they did well with some of the undrafteds. They brought in undrafted free agents that I think people thought were going to be drafted or go way earlier in the process. So, of course, we love that. I mean, the NFL probably has some reasons that those folks didn't get drafted that we probably don't know about. But, like, overall, yeah, I think it was a good weekend for the Vikings.
I think that's the funniest thing is just, like, obviously I did a ton of mock drafts, and we all do it, but just how wrong we can be. Like, we were talking about the linebacker Pace in like the 5th round, the 4th round sometimes on this show, and he just goes undrafted. Now, thankfully, we still got him, but it's just to your point, Jason, goes to show we know nothing compared to these NFL guys.
And I think we too, as fans, like people, whether you're tight with the like following the Vikings or not, like the casual or people that like do a little bit more work, like we do. So many times we focus on just like a handful of players in specific spots when the Vikings board is so huge. Like they have 500 plus players on a board, and we're only narrowing it down to like 5 or 6 players at each pick, and even sometimes less than that. And so the Vikings, when they take a player, we're like, why would they take that player? It's like, well, they've done an extensive amount of work on that specific player, and they've done that for 300 plus players across the draft. And so like when Jason talks about fit and need and those things, the Vikings, how they position their fit and needs is different than how fans perceive that as well. And so I try to be a little bit more graceful with some of that because we don't know how they're talking and thinking about it. It doesn't mean they're right, but we also, like, it's hard to just, like, be like, oh, man, I'm right because I didn't like this player. It's like, well, you know, they have multiple people within their building that did for a variety of reasons.
Yep.
Like a
with way more, like, resources available to formulate that decision. So, like, going back to my Friday,
YouTube isn't enough?
Going back to my Friday night, right? Where I have watched, like, Mekhi Blackman twice, not even full game tapes of himself, or watching other players. And I formulated a decision drunkenly of just like horrible.
You were drunk on Friday?
No. And
Hey, can I just say something?
I just wanted to hold on, Matt, one second. I just want to apologize to everyone here. Flip, I know you were on the show, Matt.
Bro, it's called Vikings Happy
It
Hour,
was great, dude.
I mean, I
Ryan.
had fun with it, and that's what you do at happy hour, right? You get a little drunk, you say stupid, stuff.
Normally, you get drunk at the happy hour, not heading into it. But
You didn't deserve that pick, Ryan. You didn't deserve. The Vikings did not need to make you wait 3 hours, then make you wait another hour just to pick some guy you never heard of from the same school as a first-round pick. Like, what type of scouting is that? Can you imagine being a Midwest scout and 2 days of the draft go by and they're just like, oh, we're just going to pick these SoCal boys?
Yeah.
Like,
well,
you didn't deserve that.
and the funny part about that is after that, I'm like, I was probably too harsh on this kid. Let me go watch him. I go pull up one game tape, pass out about 2 minutes in. But I did take some time the next morning here on Saturday morning to go watch him. And yeah, I mean, dude's a player. Again, I was fixated on, the D-tack or DN, whatever you want to call him, from Northwestern, and the cornerback from South Carolina and cornerback from Purdue. And heck, those guys went much later in the draft anyway, right? So it's like, maybe my evaluation was wrong, which it's fine. Like, like you guys have said, they have a lot more resources available than I do.
I'll have to move you, Miles, if you want to show off.
Boom.
Yeah,
Your suggestion to climb in the pocket.
Yeah. Oh no.
Speaking of, just continue on the draft conversation. Day 3, they went and got Jay Ward, Jacqueline Roy, Jaron Hall, and Dwayne McBride. Are you guys happy with those picks? Specifically Jaron Hall, because that's an interesting one. I think it's the quarterback. We knew we'd target one eventually. But yeah, what are you guys thinking on those picks?
I mean,
Sorry.
first
I need to direct.
Jaron Hall highlight that I went and saw. First clip, first video, 4th and 5.
No, 4th and 8.
Hall,
Wasn't it 4th and 8?
It's 4th and 5, but he throws for 8 yards past the sticks. So I'm in. I'm in. That's all. I stopped. My film analysis was one play, and I'm in. So
Perfect.
That's it. I'm good.
Don't need to see anything else. Flip,
Yeah, I've been
feel
a fan
about it?
of Jaron Hall for a little while now. Again, I was thinking later in the draft, like we got him in, right? I know some people are advocating for him earlier. I still thought I liked Dorian Thompson-Robinson a bit better, but he got taken a little bit earlier than.
Well, the Vikings might have got sniped. They might have got sniped from him too. We don't know.
And that's what I heard. I heard somebody on K-Fan apparently was saying that we traded up first, and then who ended up taking him? I forget. Cleveland. Yeah, Cleveland. So Cleveland then jumped ahead of us or something like that. So, yeah, but I mean, Jaron Hall is still a good player. What I was happy about is we took him and not like Tanner McKee, because Jaron Hall has athletic upside. And worst case scenario, you have a guy with the tools and the traits versus hoping a statue quarterback can process the NFL well and navigate through that and become successful. It's harder for that person to be successful than a guy like Jaron Hall, in my opinion. So I like the bigger swing at that attempt, and hopefully it pays off.
Flip, what do you think about Jaron Hall?
I think it's a value pick. You look at him, just where he went compared to all those other quarterbacks. I thought, yeah, they did try to trade up, but they also traded back out of a range where they could guarantee a quarterback, a specific quarterback. So it seems like they were like, you know what? As long as we get one of these 3 or 4 guys, we'll be happy. And it ends up being Jaron Hall. I think it's a great, like Ryan said, just great upside there. And a project where they can go, Kevin O'Connell, he don't have to develop his first quarterback as a head coach, at Caleb Williams, for example, like a top 3 pick. He can, work through Jaron Hall, develop with him, and Jaron Hall is not going to be the only person who benefits from that development. I think our coaches will learn a lot about how to develop modern quarterback more so than they've already done. I mean, was Kevin O'Connell even in Los Angeles with Jared Goff? I'm not sure. So any reps you can get, any new body you can get in the building, I think is great there. I think the McBride pick, also a great value pick where, fills a need, but you're also like, I don't think they were necessarily looking for running back there, but they saw the value of McBride and they see in their scouting, they think there's solutions to his one knock, which is the pass catching ability. That's what they were saying in the press conference. So really happy with those two last picks. The earlier draft is, I think they definitely keyed in on a bunch of players, which we don't always think is great process. Like the trade up for Roy, the Blackman pick. I think if they applied the same strategy there where you're like, you know what? We feel like there's a lot of good cornerbacks on the board. Let's go with the value option. Keep an extra pick in this draft to execute there. But overall, you could see, the last two picks in the draft may be the two biggest steals.
Yeah, I'm excited. We've been talking a while about just taking a running back later in the draft, especially with Cook's status. I mean, everyone's saying he's not going to be on the team, and I have to believe that. But yeah, adding another player to that running back room is a great addition. Jason, before the show, you mentioned Kwesi's presser. I haven't had a chance to watch it, but what can you kind of break it down? Like, what did he talk about?
I just thought some of the interesting things, like we're talking about, like Dalvin, and kind of what the McBride pick could mean for that. It was just continuing. One of the big takeaways there is kind of how he's talked about the Hall pick and kind of how that's just another thing that adds to how they're thinking about the quarterback position. And really, I think what I've enjoyed about, obviously there's a lot of coach speak and double talk and like they're not saying a lot, but like Kwesi's really big on optionality. And that's something that we haven't had in the past for the Vikings. Like we've always, through the last regime, like everyone knew what the first round pick was going to be because like we always boxed ourselves in where we like didn't have options. Like we were in a place where like we have to make this decision because the hole is just so glaringly obvious. Like that's just what we have to do all the time. And Kwesi seems to be very big on like having options and keeping them open across the board. So like in the first round, like none of us were really sure. Like people had preferences, like wide receiver was talked about, cornerback was talked about. Like there were so many things thrown out there because there were options in the way the Vikings could go about it. They like really tried to bring in bodies at all the positions of need in free agency, even if they weren't great players, just people to fill the seat so that you could have options on where you went in the draft with that first round, depending on how things fell. And kind of the way they were talking about Hall with like Kirk and like, hey, maybe Hall develops. Maybe we go back to the table with Kirk. Maybe Kirk balls because of just we have options. We have different ways that we can go to get this thing figured out. And just that way of thinking and strategizing and setting things up for yourself, I think is just a smarter way of doing things, even if at times, like, when the bullets are flying in the draft, there may be things here or there that we don't love about the process. It seems like big picture, the way that they're moving is a very smart way to go about it. And then even like some of the things where like, I don't know, we're getting a little bit of heat on Twitter because like our players didn't test great. Even just some nods to the fact that like GPS data kind of told a bit of a different story on some of the guys there as well. Yeah, those things are heartening to see that they're really pulling in information from everywhere and giving themselves options and not boxing themselves in, not getting too desperate where they just like they're forced to do something. So that was just for me the biggest takeaway.
Yeah, and then one of the other things too is just going specifically to one of the players, Ward, where a lot of people are like kind of surprised by the pick, just given what was on the board, and then like we just took a cornerback earlier, and he was talking about in their process they had starter level grades from multiple people at multiple positions, meaning one scout said that he had a starter level grade at corner. One had him at nickel. One had him at safety. One had him at box, right? Like all these different things. He's like, oh, when I have all these opinions coming in about this player that are varying, but also starter level, like value, then, and at multiple positions, like obviously we're going to fulfill a position and put him in a spot, but that just speaks volumes to the type of player he is. That if he can be that successful at 3 different positions, then he must be a quality.
That's what I was going to talk about. Ryan, is Ward was probably my favorite day 3 pick in the sense that he may not be great at any one thing, but when you look at teams that use depth and use guys across the field, and especially in a Brian Flores defense, you having a guy that's playable. He may not be really good or great at any one position, but he's playable and can get on the field at multiple positions. That's so invaluable. So like even if his one overall PFF grade isn't the greatest across like his entire grade, he can do multiple things for a defense, and that in itself is so invaluable, especially with depth, especially as a rookie and a guy in his contract in a rookie contract who, if you need him to jump in and play box for a few snaps or a game, he can probably do that. He obviously has to learn the playbook, but like if you need him to play nickel, you need him to jump in and do that. He can do that as depth. You need him to play on the outside because you guys got hurt during a game. He can jump in a pinch to do that type of thing and be a playable level player. And that type of thing it goes underrated. I know teams, they struggle with, if we can't put one guy in one spot and he's not great in one spot, then that's why Ward might be a 5th round pick instead of a 3rd or a 2nd, because his one position isn't as great as like being good at multiple. But I think that just in itself is so invaluable for a team like this that likes to move guys around as much as Brian Flores is going to do. And so I think if he can pick up on the playbook, I think the level of play there is going to be good across what they ask him to do.
And I think I did see, we've been speaking about it all show and all off season, but I did see a quote, I think, just within the last couple of days about Brian Flores just wanting that versatility from his defenders, like even vocalizing it again. And so we're seeing it with some of those draft picks. Were you guys, it's undrafted free agents. Obviously, they're most likely not going to pan out, but were there any undrafted free agents you guys particularly liked that we got? Ryan, I'll start with you because you shook your head right away, and Miles says I need to direct my questions to people.
Sure. Yeah, I think there was a few that stood out to me, obviously. So obviously you already talked about Ivan Pace. We don't really need a deep dive into that, but just the fact that we did have a need at additional depth at that position, his calling card is creating pressure and blitzing. And in a Brian Flores defense, it makes sense that, we'd be interested in him. I think he got knocked a bit just because he's not overly fast and he's not a very big guy. So there are concerns about him probably being like an every down contributor. But who knows? Like, these are all just projections, right? And I liked what I saw on tape. I think he's a very disruptive player. Andre Carter, the second from Army, he is another guy, again, where athletic testing wasn't the greatest, and this dude definitely needs to get into an NFL weight room, but the tools are there and you're investing in the tools here. I think he led the NCAA in sacks last year, not this past season, but the season before, where now teams started game planning a little bit more around him. So those sack numbers weren't quite as significant this year, but the upside's there. So now you're betting on the upside. You're betting on Flores to be able to take this guy and mold him. And then again, our strength and conditioning team to be able to develop, the more physical skill set there. And then lastly, I had to go to Crondon from Oklahoma and the DB. He led Oklahoma in interceptions this last year. He's a transfer. I forget from where. So he's not born and bred Oklahoma Sooner. So, I'll take that from what it is. But either way, I was happy to bring in additional cornerback competition because I do think that was something that we needed to do. We need to push these young, talented guys up top. Even Tay Gowan, he put out a tweet the other day, hey, I'm not seeing my name mentioned when you guys talk about, Viking corners. He's got a little chip on his shoulder, I'm sure, right now as well. But we need to bring in the competition to get the best out of all these guys. For sure.
Any final thoughts from the rest of you on just overall draft weekend? And we'll do deeper dives on these players in the future weeks to give a better analysis. But just initial reactions from you guys.
Flip was right. is my initial reaction. Over the years, Flip has been telling us, don't get overly invested in these players that you fall in love with in your mock drafts. And this is probably the first season,
100%.
first year that like I took a bit more of a step back from all that and just like was able to just sit back and enjoy it and not be disappointed because the Vikings didn't follow my imaginary advice in a game I was playing on the internet, picking players on a website. And so, yeah, it just generally made the whole weekend a lot more fun for me. And like, yeah, it was almost like Christmas, you know, the Vikings pick a player and then you get to go and like learn something about them. And of course, their highlight reels make them look amazing. So it's all good.
Only watch the highlight reels.
Disappointment of that guy that I really like, they didn't pick him. So Flip was right. That's my takeaway.
They're all Vikings now. I think my big takeaway is I've been looking at the 2024 defensive end free agent class every day this weekend because, I mean, we got Brian Burns, we got Chase Young, we got Nick Bosa, Josh Allen. Those guys probably won't be the ones we target, but I can almost guarantee we're going to have to make a big money free agent signing at the end of next year.
Well, you're booking it early.
Booking it.
All right. Miles, any last thoughts from you?
Yeah, I think it's more. I like the process of the draft. I think we talked about that, but also just around there's still some uncertainty at a few spots for the Vikings coming out of the draft. Obviously, with Dalvin Cook and Zadarius Smith, we don't know what the situation is going to be for either of those guys. I mean, like you said earlier, Dalvin Cook, it's likely he's out, but we don't know how that's going to play out. And it didn't happen during the draft. So we'll see what happens there. And then obviously quarterback is another one. They drafted Jaren Hall in the 5th, but to act like he's the heir apparent to Kirk Cousins is just, it's way, way too early to even the Vikings aren't even thinking that way, right? Like they took him as a guy like, hey, we like what traits he has. Maybe he could become something, but like, they're not even thinking like heir apparent. So, cause otherwise they'd come out and said something like that. So, I wouldn't go down that path. But I do think there's still that question around quarterback long term. And then lastly, I think just like the cap situation for the Vikings, because they still have some needs. The Vikings are never going to be able to fill, and teams in general usually aren't going to be able to fill every need in an offseason, at least to the degree where fans think they should. Like linebacker is one of those positions I always felt, hey, I think they brought in a guy like Troy Reader for depth. They brought Jordan Hicks back. I think that's fine, but like I think people were they overreact too much to the fact that they didn't get enough depth there and stuff. But I mean, they seemed like guys like Troy Dye and whatnot. So I just wouldn't overreact to some of the spots that the Vikings haven't been able to fill long term because they don't have much cap space and there just isn't a lot to work with. You can't make everybody happy. You can't make every position perfect. So I'm just excited to see how rookie minicamp and training camp as they get into the summer goes, just because guys like Jordan Addison, Jaren Hall, Blackman, I'm excited to see how those guys get fit into the defense. Jay Ward, how do they fit into the team, I should say, and how they look. And I'm always a sucker for the rookie, what numbers they're going to be. It literally means nothing, but I like that stuff, like little things. We still haven't seen the Vikings free agents, what official numbers those guys are going to be too. So it's just fun to see some of those little things. I know Addison's going to be 3, which is cool. I like that he gets to get that number, but Byron Murphy, is he going to get number 7? I think so, but
I want someone to wear 0.
Announced it. And yeah, who's going to be that player? Someone's going to wear 0. So who's going to be that player for the Vikings?
Ivan Pace.
Is going to be
when he makes the team.
As a UDFA, he gets to be the first guy to wear 0.
Wow. No, give it to Kirk. Make Kirk switch his number to 0.
Can you imagine?
Oh man. Well, this was a blast. We should do the 5 of us more often, especially when the season rolls around. It's always fun chatting with you guys and hearing all the different perspectives. So, like I said, we'll probably do bigger analysis on each of these draft picks in the coming weeks between our shows. We'll look at some of the free agents that are still out there, and then the content won't stop through the summer. We'll have you covered here on Climbing the Pocket, Vikings Happy Hour, and the Final Score. So make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. Keep coming back, keep commenting, and we'll try our best to respond to those comments. But until next time, Skol Vikings.